Where can the Buffalo Bills improve statistically in 2024 that will lead to more wins? I have several areas to point out to you today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, folks, welcome in. I spent a lot of time studying metrics and stats. And of course, I use that to complement the film study to give me the perspective that I do on the Bills and the rest of the NFL. And I've recently spent some time really looking at metrics. And the Bills are a good football team, and therefore, in just about every category, every statistical category, they rank very well, usually in the top 10, if not higher. But there are some areas where they don't fare well, and they stand out because you're used to seeing, well, where do the Bills rank? 5th, 8th, 2nd, 9th, 10th, 11th, 3rd. And then you're like, whoa, they're 28th in this, and they're 24th in this, and they're 30th in this. I'm here to bring up those meaningful metrics that the Bills did not fare well in last season that I think they can improve upon in 2024, and that will lead to more wins. So let's do it. I have 6 different, I guess it's probably really 7. I have 7 different categories to present to you today. 3 on offense, 3 on defense, and 1 on special teams. We'll start with the offensive side of the football. And the first metric that stands out to me is giveaways, turnovers. The Bills in 2023 ranked 23rd in the NFL with 28 giveaways. Oh, by the way, the Chiefs also had 28 giveaways. Don't tell anybody. But 23rd in the NFL with 28 giveaways. And the Bills have never really ranked well under Josh Allen when it comes to giveaways. And starting in 2020, the Bills ranked 20th. In 2021, they were 13th. In 2022, they were 31st. And in 2023, they were 23rd. So they actually got better compared to 2022. But you still like to see the Bills be better when it comes to not turning over the football. And so with all of these metrics that I bring up, I want to ask myself the question, why? And then I want to ask myself the question, how can it improve? So why did the Bills rank 23rd in the NFL with 28 giveaways? Well, 18 Josh Allen interceptions. That'll be a big part of it, obviously. And I think that's some of the give and take with Josh Allen, is he does throw some interceptions. And I think last year specifically, he had bad interception luck. If you look at his turnover-worthy throw percentage and his interception percentage, they're pretty close. He didn't get away with much. If there was a ball to be intercepted, the other team took it away. And that included some really good plays by the defense. And, of course, not all interceptions are created equally. Some of them certainly are bad decisions and bad throws by Josh Allen. Some of them are poor routes or poor effort at the catch point. There's tip passes, right? There's things that play into it, but, I mean, still a lot of interceptions. Now, you're not going to take less touchdowns from Josh Allen, right? It's part of the deal. The best quarterbacks now and in the history of the game, they throw interceptions. That's part of the deal. Like, you have to be willing to fire a football in there with confidence, and sometimes it gets picked off. But I think we can agree that 18 is probably too many. You like to see that down into the low teens, 10 to 13, something like that. So that's one reason why. And then the Bills also lost 10 fumbles. And not that many of them were Josh Allen's. You had James Cook had a couple. Deontay Hardy had a couple. Kincaid had one. Gabe Davis had one. Stephon Diggs had one. So 10 fumbles lost. How can this improve? Well, Josh Allen, some of the decision-making can improve. I mean, you look at the Jets game, I think that's one that really stands out to me, the turnovers that Josh Allen committed in that game. And if, the opening week game is the one I'm referring to. If that comes down, this could be a different story, right? He had, 4 or 5 turnovers that game, 3 interceptions, bad fumble. So some of that is Josh Allen decision-making, but I think the cohesion of the offense really stands out to me. And I think the turnover splits skew more heavily towards the Ken Dorsey portion of the season. And I think with a play caller in Joe Brady that I think does a better job of sequencing his play calls, I think he does a better job of building in more options, it being less predicated on Josh Allen being on the same page with his receivers and seeing the defense the same way and that dictating where the football goes to. And I think Josh Allen just playing a little bit more, just playing football, being able to have some more manufactured throws, some more quick game. I think all of that could lead to less giveaways. But I think, obviously, I want to start this conversation with the big one. And as I've said repeatedly, as it's widely understood, that the most correlative metric to winning and losing outside of points for and points against is giveaways and takeaways. And the Bills take away the football fairly well. They got to stop giving it away so much, or at least be like league average, right? That'd be good. Somewhere in the middle of the pack as opposed to towards the bottom or towards the bottom 25%. So that's giveaways. The next one that I want to get into is vertical passing offense. Throws that are 20 yards or more down the field. Let me give you some areas that Josh Allen ranked on throws 20 yards or more down the field. He was 29 of 82. 35% completion percentage. That's 21st in the NFL. 962 yards, 8 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. Josh Allen on throws 20 yards or more down the field had a passer rating of 73.4. 25th in the NFL. And you don't want to know who his neighbors are. Like if you look at the quarterbacks that are right above him and right below him, you're going to see names like Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi and Kenny Pickett and Bryce Young and Zach Wilson, right? This is not the neighborhood of quarterbacks you want to be in. Oh, by the way, and don't tell anybody, Patrick Mahomes' passer rating on throws 20 yards or more down the field, 49.1, second worst in the NFL. And obviously you could see they went out this offseason and added an Xavier Worthy. They added a Hollywood Brown. They got some speed to that wide receiver core, I'm guessing in hopes to be a better vertical passing offense. And the Bills need to be a better vertical passing offense. So why did you see the Bills slot where they did on these throws 20 yards or more down the field? I think part of it's Josh Allen's ball placement. And that's what got me so giddy when Josh started talking about mechanics. And the thing that he's worked on the most this offseason, he said big time mechanics. And shoring up his sequencing with his throws, making sure that he's not long with his stride, long with his arm. And I think he's admitted that he's learned some things through that. And you look at the last couple of seasons, and whether it was the shoulder injury last year or 2 years ago, the elbow, right? Josh Allen's had throwing arm injuries the last 2 seasons. And I think that can, of course, force you to alter your mechanics to compensate for the deficiency from the injury. And because of that, your mechanics are off, your ball placement suffers because of that. Go back to the big breakout for Josh Allen in 2020. What did he do? Well, he mapped out his mechanics, right? He figured it out, and that led to a big boom. And I'm hoping for a similar type situation this year. So it's understandable that his mechanics got away from him a little bit to compensate for injuries. Well, now he's healthy. He's mapped those things out, and I'm hoping for better ball placement, which leads to better consistency down the field. The other thing that I think plays into the poor metrics as it relates to the vertical passing offense is a lack of vertical receiving talent. I don't think the Bills had good down the field receivers last year. Diggs, I think, has regressed in that area of his game. I think Gabe Davis has always been pretty inefficient. Deontay Hardy wasn't what they expected. Trent Sherfield wasn't what they expected. So hopefully you have better down the field receivers this year. So how can it improve? Well, Josh Allen mechanics, scheme. I think that can help. But also, do you have better deep receivers? Well, Marquez Valdez-Scantling feels like he should help in that capacity. That's kind of been his thing throughout his entire career. I'm hopeful that Curtis Samuel can be part of this equation. Obviously, he has speed. But when you look at Curtis Samuel's career, he hasn't had that many chances to win down the field. But when he's had those opportunities, he's been very efficient. The last 4 years for Curtis Samuel, 29 targets, 20 yards or more down the field. He hauled in 20 of those. I mean, it's 69%, 20 of 29. That's unbelievably good. And so why didn't he get more opportunity? That's probably the question. Well, I've been saying this. I mean, he had 5 offensive coordinators in 7 seasons. His quarterbacks were late-stage Cam Newton, Kyle Allen, Teddy Bridgewater, Taylor Heineke, the regressed form of Carson Wentz, and Sam Howell. I mean, yeah, no kidding. His efficiency and utilization hasn't had consistency. Look what he's had to deal with. Hopefully, this can be a thing that he can provide Buffalo. Keon Coleman, right? Like, not a burner, but size, ball skills, hands. You're hopeful that can help down the field. Mac Hollins, I do think, is a good vertical receiver. Maybe more Dalton Kincaid. Right? That's your path, I think, to more efficient, better, more consistent down the field passing. So there's the first couple of items I wanted to get into: giveaways and vertical passing offense. On the other side of it, I have one more offensive area, and then we'll start to talk defense. So be sure to stick with me. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fits only available to U.S. customers. All right, one more offensive area I want to get into, and that's yards after contact in the run game. Yards after contact in the run game. Big area for the Bills to get better at. And the Bills were a very good rushing offense last year. If they can produce more after contact yards, man, there's some meat on the bone for this to be even more effective. So let's talk about it. The Bills ranked 28th in percentage of yards after contact. So 51% of the rush yards for the Bills last year came after contact. That's 28th. They had 1.65 yards before contact. That's 9th best in the NFL. 2.2 yards after contact per rush, which is 26th. 2.2 yards after contact per rush. That's 26th. So why is this the case? Why do the Bills perform poorly post-contact when running the football? Well, I think it starts with James Cook's your leading ball carrier, and it's not really his thing. Doesn't mean James Cook's not a good running back. Doesn't mean that there's not other ways that he can produce big plays. But sustaining himself through contact is not going to be a strength of his. I mean, he's 5'11", 195, maybe 200 pounds. That's what he came in at during the combine. That's not the type of frame that lends itself well to a low center of gravity with a dense build that allows you to sustain yourself through contact, right? He's kind of tall, lanky, and slim for an NFL running back. Now, you've heard that his body's been reshaped a little bit. Joe Brady's commented on that, and I hope that that leads to better production post-contact. But yeah, James Cook is a slashing style of back. He's not a physical runner. So yards after contact aren't really going to be a strength of your rushing offense if James Cook's your leading ball carrier. Don't take that out of context. I'm not sitting here trying to like dog on James Cook. There's things that he does well. One of them is not yards after contact. To his credit, he's able to remove early contact because he is elusive and twitchy and he avoids a lot of it, right? Like that's the redeeming quality. But when he's hit, he kind of goes down. I think also tired legs from Latavius Murray. I mean, you were counting on having Damian Harris and Latavius Murray as your primary backups to James Cook. Damian Harris, neck injury early in the season, he's gone, right? So you lose that. Like, he's probably your best post-contact runner. And then Latavius Murray's legs just got tired, you could tell. So those things factored in. And then also Ty Johnson, who's a good post-contact runner, he wasn't involved in the offense until week 10. So that's why. Now, how can it improve? Well, I'll start with pointing out that James Cook has added some bulk, and you hope that that leads to a little bit more ability to sustain himself through contact. Ray Davis, his arrival, I think, is a big deal here. You talk about the polar opposite of body composition from James Cook. It's Ray Davis, who's got the stubby frame, kind of built like a fire hydrant, and that's very good for sustaining yourself through contact, taking on, absorbing contact, and being able to finish and plow forward. I mean, what is he, like 5'9", 5'8", something like that, 215? I mean, that's going to allow you to absorb and play through contact. And then I think also Ty Johnson, more of an established piece of what's going on here. He was signed just before training camp. Like I said, it wasn't until week 10 where he had a role. That should be different this year. I think you have a lot working for you here to be a better rushing offense after contact. All right, let's get into some of these defensive things, and this is kind of a 2-for-1. Situational defense. The Bills metrically were a good defense last year, but there were two areas that really shined as poor. And they're the situational metrics: third down defense, red zone defense. These are big ones. The Bills ranked 19th in the NFL in both categories. They allowed a conversion on third downs 53% of the time. That's too high. They allowed a touchdown in the red zone on 56% of the opposing trips to the red zone. They scored a touchdown. 19th. Not terrible, but those are very uncharacteristic. The Bills typically rank towards the top of the league when it comes to third down and red zone. That wasn't the case last year. Wow, why is that? Well, I think it's defensive injuries, right? That plays a big role in it. You lose Matt Milano in week 5. You lose Daquan Jones for most of the season in week 5. You lose Tre'Davious White in week 4. Benford missed a little time. Both the safeties, Poyer and Hyde, missed a little time. I mean, you're trying to figure out how to make it work without those guys. Rousseau's playing through a broken foot. Oliver missed the game. I mean, that contributes a lot to it. And then I think in addition to that, overall, a lack of clutch pass rush. And that's one of my big talking points. Like, I'm tired of this pass rush being pretty good, right? Like, high pressure percentage. But like, when you need it and you got to have it, it's not there. And that's why I think when you remember when Ed Oliver sealed the game against the Chargers, he beat that guard and like had that game clinching sack. It felt so good because you're like, wow, there it is. Like, that's the thing. That's the thing that they need. And it showed up in that moment, but not enough. Not enough otherwise. And then you remember like the year before when Von Miller was available and, you know, he had the big pressure against Kansas City, big sack against Kansas City to kind of ice that game. A big play against the Jets that first season. Like, there's been those moments. And then the Bills, like, everybody talks about the Bills lacking a number one wide receiver. I want to talk about them lacking a number one pass rusher. Like, who's the dude that in that moment, right? Who's the Myles Garrett, the Nick Bosa, the TJ Watt? Like, they don't have that guy. I'd rather have that guy than the number one receiver. Maybe that's just me being crazy or whatever, but I think defensive line play is so critical, and the Bills just haven't had those clutch moments. So how can it improve? Well, when we're talking about third down and red zone, how can that improve? This is what excites me about the defensive turnover, whether it's coaching or players. As I've said repeatedly, Joe Dana, the only defensive coach that's back in the same role this year. Everything else is different. I like that. You got some new young coaches available. Bobby Babich is your coordinator. I like all of that because for as good as the Bills defense has been, collectively throughout the entire McDermott era, including, big time regular season results, hasn't been there in those clutch moments, hasn't been there in those playoff elimination games. So, yeah, I'm excited for some new thoughts and ideas and new blood and new energy in this coaching staff, in addition to some of the turnover on the personnel side. Give us those fresh legs at safety. You felt it, right? Like some of those high leverage moments, Sean McDermott would dial up some blitz stuff and you put Poyer or Hyde in man coverage. They couldn't run with guys. Rasul Douglas is going to be around for an entire year, right? Like you haven't had Trey White's supposed to be the number one corner for this team. He hasn't been that in 3 years. So you get Rasul Douglas, who's kind of profiles as his number one corner type. And you just heard him talk a couple weeks ago and saying, look, I didn't really know what I was doing. I just did whatever Poyer or Hyde told me to do. Now he actually knows the scheme. Matt Milano's availability, that's going to be a big deal. Having that guy back. And then, of course, that pass rush. Is the pass rush better? I don't know. I would say it's probably not. You lost your leading sack guy and Leonard Floyd. And what did you do to replace him? Well, you got some nice new backup defensive tackles, and you hope that Gregory Rousseau takes a step and Epenea can take another step and Von Miller can find some life, or that one of these guys like Javon Solomon can really become a dude really quickly. So, yeah, I don't really look at the pass rush and say, yeah, you know what? This was a problem last year, and it certainly looks like it could be better this year. It doesn't add up. But I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that somehow they can figure that out, whether that's even more at Oliver or Daquan Jones can make more of an impact in that capacity. But that's critical to me. Like, clutch pass rush has to become a thing for this football team. And it just hasn't been. Need that to change. All right, we got another defensive metric, and I got to talk a little special teams as well on the other side of it, so be sure to stick with me. All right, folks, one more defensive nugget here, and this one is defensive yards per rush allowed. Defensive yards per rush allowed. The Bills ranked 28th in the NFL, 4.6 yards per carry allowed on the ground. And I remember this, if you guys are everydayers and you listen to the crossover episodes on Thursday before the game each week, you could tell that opposing host came into those conversations kind of licking their chops saying, well, what's up with the run defense? And I would tell them, well, I mean, they got gashed for some longer runs earlier in the season that skewed some of the numbers, and the Bills are a team that kind of makes a choice to concede some rushing yards because they want to be more equipped to stop the pass, and they're willing to kind of concede some of that. And that's how those conversations seem to go every week. But as I ask myself the question, why did the Bills allow 4.6 yards per carry, 28th in the NFL? I think it is part of what I just said earlier in the season that they got gashed for some longer runs. I think it is a product of their style of play. The Bills have an up-the-field penetration style defense that's going to lead to some levels, right? You talk about run defense, guys got to be on the same level, fitting their gaps. And if you're going up the field, that's going to create some issues with levels and natural opportunities to get some longer runs. I think missed tackles are a huge part of it. I'll highlight that I'll highlight it right now. The Bills last season, according to Fantasy Points Data Suite, they allowed 1.31 yards before contact against the run. That's fourth best in the NFL. Fourth best. Well, you really shouldn't be fourth worst when it comes to yards per carry if you're doing a good job of initiating contact at 1.31 yards. What's that tell you? It's missed tackles. And that's been an issue under McDermott since he's walked in. And again, I think part of it's a product of the style of defense that they play. But guys just miss too many tackles. And then I think interior defensive line depth is another factor here. I think Tim Settle and Jordan Phillips stink out loud against the run. So how can it improve? Well, I think, first of all, let's acknowledge that it did in 2023. The run defense got better and better throughout the course of the season. I think that the interior defensive line depth is better. As I've talked about, swapping out Jordan Phillips and Tim Settle for Austin Johnson, Deshaun Williams, and Dwayne Carter. Sign me up for that all day. And then hopefully you can tackle better. Hopefully that Terrell Bernard's second season as a starter lends itself well to his run fits being even better. Hopefully an entire season of Matt Milano leads to better run defense. Fresh legs at safety. I mean, Poyer and Hyde just sometimes when they had to come down and fill the alley or tackle, they couldn't get square and they couldn't get good angles, and guys got past them. A full season of Rasul Douglas. Rasul Douglas is an excellent tackling corner. I think these are really good pieces of the recipe here, really good ingredients for the run defense improving. And it's going to be important. Like the Bills' schedule this year, you got some really good rushing offenses. Miami twice, Baltimore, the Colts, the entire NFC West that the Bills play, Seattle, the Rams, the 49ers, the Cardinals, very good rushing offense, the Lions, very good rushing offense. You gotta figure this out because you're going to be tested in a big way with your ability to stop the run. The last thing I want to talk about is punt coverage. Covering punts. The Bills were not good at this. They allowed 11.6 yards per return, 27th in the NFL. Well, why did this happen? I think a lot of it's punting. I think Sam Martin didn't have a good year. Part of it was directional punting, a lot of middle of the field punts. That's the worst place to put a punt, in the middle of the field. It's the hardest to cover. Saw too much of that. Not enough hang time. Sam Martin, 4.2 seconds average hang time. That's 31st in the NFL out of 32 punters. 28th in yards per punt, 27th in net. I mean, Sam Martin wasn't very good. So you start asking yourself, well, why did the Bills bring in two punters to compete with him? Well, he wasn't good last year. So while Sam Martin had his own struggle, he finished the season really well, but had struggles. You also had regression, I think, from some of your core special teamers in Saron Neal and Tyler Matakevich. I don't think those guys had their best seasons covering punts or playing special teams in general, and I think that's why neither one of them's on the team anymore. Probably in addition to some, salary cap decisions and what you can spend. And I think also the defensive injuries that we discussed affected availability of players for special teams. So Matthew Smiley, on a week-to-week basis, is working with different guys, and that's going to lead to inconsistent results. So how can the Bills get better covering punts? Well, maybe it is time for that new punter. And Matt Hawk's already been released, so it's down to Sam Martin or the undrafted free agent punter out of San Diego State, Jack Browning. And what are you worried about? Are you worried about going from a bad punter to a bad punter? Right? So, like, what if he has some ceiling that appeals to you? Like, do it. Get a guy in there that might be better than the 28th best punter in the NFL. Now, I know the concern with Jack Browning is all the conversations we had with Matt Araiza, and that as a kicker and punter at San Diego State, that means he didn't hold. So he's got to prove himself in that capacity. You know what's more frustrating than Tyler Bass missing a game-winning field goal? The hold not being correct or the hold not getting down, right? Like there's some anxiousness that comes with that, from me at least. But you got to figure this piece out. And then hopefully you have better coverage of punts. You did sign two quality special teams players. Mac Hollins, big-time special teams pedigree. He should help you a lot as a gunner. Nicholas Moreau should help you quite a bit. I hope that Cole Bishop or whoever the third safety is going to be an asset in this capacity. You should have some fresh blood in these special teams units and a very competitive roster, and hopefully that brings out the best of them in terms of their efforts on special teams in general, but also covering punts. So there you have it, folks. Not a rosy conversation today, right? We're highlighting areas that need to improve. So hopefully if you're looking for optimism, you found it in some of the solutions that I offered. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us here today on the podcast. I hope that you enjoyed. I also hope that you'll take a second to rate, review, share, and subscribe to the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.